Welcome to Module 0 of APS1013, the Applying Innovation course in engineering. And as the title page says, it's about creative problem solving and practices and practices. And essentially, we have workshop style seminars, and in this course, the course is completely client-centric, or in what we call industrial partner-centric. So the course itself combines theory of applying innovation along with real work in industry. And typically each year, each semester, we have, when the course is run, we have about 5 projects with various major companies, both startup companies, companies that are starting for the first time, and also very mature, large-scale, multinational companies. And students, mainly students with industry experience, get into more advanced innovation and change management and technical, improving processes through technical applications of theory and so on. So the course is all about helping engineers transition into strategic innovation management. So going from being maybe managers of a department or even just practitioner engineers in a cubicle or doing design work or working on a team or maybe just project management of a narrow technical project. This is all about moving engineers into strategic thinking. And by strategic we mean projects and objectives and initiatives that affect the whole well-being of the entire enterprise, or at least maybe a division of the enterprise. So it's not focused so much on narrow change inside a particular department, but it tends to cut across departments and often cutting across the whole enterprise. Not all the projects are obviously enterprise-wide. Some are just focused on specific departments, for example, engineering or the quality control department or the manufacturing department, or even the sales department. Some of our engineers are working with companies who are very technical products, so they need sales engineers and they need a sales management process that considers the technical complexity. So it's a very broad range of projects. So this is basically the syllabus in one page, and the weeks and the modules. So we're here today, this is Module 0, which gives you sort of an overview of the whole project. Module 1 talks about orientation and planning, how we work on teams, how the assessment of the course will work, the detailed syllabus and so on. I'm not going to talk about that here. That's all covered in the Module 1 videos. So the course there's 3 parts to the Applied Innovation course. And let me say right up front, ideally you've taken the Management of Innovation course. You don't have to, but ideally you have, because the Management Innovation course teaches the broad concepts of management innovation. How do you set a future state vision? What is the diffusion of innovation? What are the dimensions of innovation, from incremental to radical innovation? How does innovation get diffused? How do you design an enterprise? How do you organize to transform an enterprise? How do you go about it? How do you do process modeling in an enterprise? How do you eliminate waste from enterprises? How do project teams work? How do integrated product teams work? How do you manage change itself? How do you manage the politics of change? All these aspects are covered in APS 1012 Management of Innovation. The applied course actually takes these concepts, so it trains you a conceptual way to think as a strategic leader in the world of innovation. And then in this course we teach you the practical tools to apply them. So for example, week 2 there's a 2 to 3 hour seminar on my 17-step process. Now you'll notice here my book, Sustaining Innovation Through Problem Solving. So this course is built around the book, but it's a lot more than what the book covers. The book just covers the basic problem solving steps, talks a little bit about business transformation. But the book is based on my own personal 25 years worth of experience. doing this work, leading change, complex change in very, very large companies, as well as small family-owned businesses as well. And a lot of the learning and a lot of the methods and the tools and the techniques are captured in the book. So the book's a hand-on guidebook that you can use over and over again and refer to it. So the course, again, 12 to 13 modules, if you think of this as a module, the introduction. The second one is, again, teaching you the 17 steps. Those 17 steps could also be the 6 steps of problem solving: identify the problem, identify the root causes, come up with possible solutions, select the solutions, implement and monitor. But I've broken them down into more fine, granular detail, into more the 17-step process. But as I say, this could also be synthesized into the normal 6-step problem solving process. So you basically get introduced to all the tools, and the book's the reference. Now, week 3, module 3, talks about business analysis. So the number one thing you have to do before you do any innovation project is you have to assess the business. You have to assess the current state. What are the efficiencies and effectiveness of the current state processes, the organization itself, the culture, and you could look at maybe just internally at the business, but you also ought to look at what their strategic plan is, how they're going to penetrate markets, what their customers think of them, what their suppliers think of them, how those processes are working, if they have any industrial partners, any mergers ahead, or maybe it was a merger, or maybe there was an acquisition, how is that going? So you have to assess the business, and so you're assessing their technology capabilities, their process capabilities, competencies, their culture, how open is the culture to change, how do they actually manage formal innovation. This is part of business analysis, and that's covered in the book. And out of that comes, when you go to a customer, a client, industrial partner, what we call them at the University of Toronto, you will have to define what their problems are. And you're never going to know what the real problems are until you analyze the business. Just because they state what a problem is, they might be giving you actually a root cause, or they might be giving you an effect of the root cause. They may not be actually identifying the real problems. And identifying the problems is the very, very first step in innovation. Identify there's an issue that has to be dealt with. And that then, number one, that actually people accept it, that there is an issue. If you can't get over those 2 hurdles, you're not going to be able to implement change. You're not going to be able to actually make any improvements. So that's the very, very first thing we do. We teach you these things. Now, the way the course is structured is there's a first industrial visit after week 3. The second industrial visit is here after week 5. The third industrial visit is after week 7. The fourth industrial visit's after week 10. It's not a coincidence that they're spread out like this, because you're learning the theory in the class so that when you go to the industrial partner / client, you're going to be able to actually engage with them. You're going to know what questions to ask them, how to engage with them, how to extract information from them. You're going to have the wherewithal to deal with that. Because if you, for example, don't know what business analysis is, and you go and you ask them questions, you won't know the kinds of questions to ask. You won't actually know how to approach analyzing their business and listening to their needs and listening to the gaps and barriers that they have that's stopping them achieving great success. So there's a timing issue here when you go to these customers. And week 4, we talk about effective organizational team. So you pretty much will have had one visit to the industrial partner. Now you yourselves will be working in teams, some of you maybe for the first time, working in teams that are actually going into industry. There's a scientific process that was coined in the mid-1960s. It's forming, storming, norming, performing, and there are other derivatives from it, but essentially what it says is that teams, when they form, there's not all wonderful harmony. They have to get to know one another. So we call that storming, where you have an issue you're trying to deal with, and the relationships are at the early stages of development, and there's often conflict arise. And you'll notice that week 5 is conflict resolution. So here we talk about effective organizational team meetings, but it's also teamwork. But running meetings is one of the most important aspects of managing innovation. You're going to hear, as you get more involved in this field, as you move up the hierarchy, ineffective meetings are costing industry, government, and all sectors hundreds of millions of dollars of waste. There are so many meetings that they're not properly managed with a proper agenda, with a proper purpose, with a proper process, and a proper outcome. Purpose, process, outcome, or payoff. What's the 3 P's? Purpose, process, payoff. So the module 4 talks about that in depth. And again, it's no coincidence that it happens just after the first industrial trip, because I expect there are certain teamwork issues arising. Obviously, when you're working with the industrial partner, you could have misunderstandings about what they need and what you actually want to achieve out of the course and so on. So there's always a teething period at the very beginning of this course of getting both the students and the industrial partner aligned. One of the things, when I get a new industrial partner on board, one of the things that always happens is that the executive that I deal with delegates the initiative of having U of T MEng, Master of Engineering students, come in to their site in order to work with them. And once it gets delegated, often it gets delegated to technical people, and often when they hear the word Master of Engineering student, oh, I'll give them technical work to do. Well, of course, the management of innovation and applying innovation is strategic management. You're learning specifically strategic management of innovation and of change, of improvement and of change. So many times when these executives that I meet pass it down into the middle management, they don't have the wherewithal to realize the objectives of the course, and often I have to step in and say, look, these students are being taught strategic management. They're not being taught how to improve the heat flow on a machine or something, or how to reduce the vibrations on a moving machine. But this is often what happens when you get an industrial partner. I have to set the expectations many, many times that these students are there to solve issues that are strategic in nature, not just technical. They could be technical, but they have to have a strategic component that serves to, relates to the survival or the future of the actual enterprise. This is enterprise level thinking, not technical thinking. So there's many levels of thinking that one can operate at. And typical engineers will be seen to be working on a technical level, so maybe level 3 on a 7-level scale, or level 2 even. And I'm looking to get our engineers up to level 5 in terms of thinking, at executive level. So first trip, you come back and you come into the classroom and you say, here are the issues, and I make you present in the classroom. There's usually about 5 teams. So these classes are typically about 20 to 25 students. Sometimes 30 would be there, but that'd probably be the max. Usually starts off maybe 50 students, but through attrition and so on in the first week or two, or if it's a 10-day course, the first couple of days, we get it down to about 20 to 25, which is quite intimate. Gives us 5 teams, and all the teams learn from one another. They're all in different industries with different partners. So week 5 is then dedicated to conflict resolution, because you may have conflict among the team members, and you may have conflict with the industrial partner. Hopefully not, because we want to avoid that, because we want to keep harmony. So it's a matter of pushing the needs of our course along with addressing the needs of the customer or of the client. So then the second industrial trip, after you do conflict resolution, I give you input into what their issues might be. So you go back and you engage with the partner again. And each of these meetings are usually 2 to 3 hours. So if there's 4 on a team or 5 on a team, you might have 2 or 3, maybe 2 or 3 or 4 go on the trip and talk to different people. So you would ask the industrial partner, if there was a particular process, let's say you're working on the product development process, you would say, I want to talk to the chief engineer of the product, and I need to talk to the manufacturing engineer, and somebody else needs to talk to the manufacturer in the plant, and another person might talk to the marketing person, just to see what the issues are. So by that time you have scoped out the people that you need to talk to drill, get down in more depth, and here you're starting to look for, you should have articulated what the issue is, you will confirm with them what the issue is, then you should be drilling down into the root causes. So you use techniques like fishbone diagrams and so on. Then in week 6 and week 7, you're learning the decision-making process. So you're learning the methodology, as I talked about, that's in my book. And then you learn about the whole concept of creativity. Creativity can be learned. You can be creative. Brainstorming techniques. There are many kinds of techniques to come up with ideas to solve problems and so on. Because this is the creativity and problem-solving tools. So you're using things like fishbone diagrams, decision-making charts, identifying, for example, the Pareto analysis, where if you have 10 issues, which issues are causing 80% of the problems. So for example, 10 issues, there's typically, if you believe and follow the Pareto analysis, and it works, and I know it, 20% of the issues are causing 80% of the problems. You've got to isolate and define what those are. So if you've got 10 issues, we'll guarantee you that there's only 2 of those, 2 or 3, maybe even 1, that's causing 80% of the problems. So you want to identify that right up front and make sure that the initiative and the money in the real projects that's spent is spent on the right things that's going to benefit the enterprise as fast as possible, so that your improvement, that the money that you're putting into your improvements, you're getting payback. You're getting payback, in a relatively short period. And that's the whole idea behind transformative change. By the 3rd trip, you've learned all these techniques. You really, in terms of a mature mind, to realize how to deal with industrial partners, that should be formed. And by this time, you're starting to come up with possible solutions. So you have to go back there, discuss these possible solutions with them, make sure you articulate the root causes, come up with solutions, and then discuss this with them. And they'll say, well, we've tried that before, or they might even say, that is an amazing insight. But the idea here is you're starting to come up, because of these, the creativity and the brainstorming technique, you're starting to come up with ideas in the class. And by the way, the videos that support all these are generic videos teaching the basic techniques, but the work we do in the class is all client-centric, it's all industrial partner-centric. So you're bringing your real live stuff to the class for us to apply the theory on. I also have you, by the way, each team each week presents some of the theory from the videos and from the academic papers, so that you're also reinforcing your practical work with a theoretical understanding of the tools and techniques that you use in your practical work. So then we go into part 3, the management of change. By this time, you have solutions, and if it was a real project, you'd start to sell those solutions to the executives and then implement them. And when you implement them, you have to have funding, you have to have an organizational approach, you have to have teams and so on to implement them. So you're then learning how to manage change. So in Module 8, it teaches you how to actually assess an organization's ability to receive change. In other words, do they have the competencies and capabilities in various areas to be able to actually transform? You have to assess their ability to, if you're going to bring in futuristic technology, let's say they have a system that's from the 2000s, between an ERP system or a CAD/CAM system from let's say from 2006, and it's 15 years old, 20 years old. That means their know-how could be 20 years old. Their competencies or capabilities. Let's say you're bringing in a new expert system, an artificial intelligence system. So you're suggesting that to improve their efficiencies. You've got to assess if they have the capabilities and the competencies to actually adapt to the new technology, to actually adapt to new processes and new changes. And that's what Module 8 teaches. Module 9, it teaches you about implementation planning. So you've come up with the solutions, you've turned them into project plans, you know exactly the skills and capabilities to implement them. Now you have to go implement. So you have to learn how to do that. Implementation is a very, very challenging prospect because you have cultural issues to deal with, as well as teaching and education and pilot projects. So there's a whole method to achieving that. And there's also the emotional intelligence side. You have to keep your cool when you have people resisting you. And there is no doubt, if you go into a company and lead change at a vice president or chief executive level, like if your customer or your partner is a chief executive officer or the president of the company, when you operate at that level, you have all his vice presidents to deal with. And typically 20% of those vice presidents are going to resist you. They might play lip service and smile to your face, but often behind the scenes they're sabotaging, because often you're undermining their power. I mentioned this in many videos, but it's part of innovation, it's part of the change. So whether you buy a company, or you build a company, or you work in a company, these are the issues that will arise. So you've got to have emotional intelligence to deal with it. That doesn't mean to say you're trying to be nice to everybody. You cannot be nice to everybody. If you're bullied, or if they try to bully you, you've got to stand up to them. You've got to take them on, and sometimes take them on in public. Better to do it in private, but sometimes when people try to undermine you, you've got to learn how to handle this. And that's what goes on in large companies and small companies. In fact, family-owned businesses are extremely rife for infighting among family members and so on. Very, very tough situation, because they're bringing all their private life into the workplace, and of course not just their current private life, but their history, the history of the family. It never leaves, it's always there. Large companies, big aerospace, defense companies and so on, they're tending, of course, the family, they're too big they are a family, a giant family, but the issues and so on are much bigger scale than when you're dealing with a small family-owned business. But you have to have the ability, if you choose this field of change management and innovation management, you have to have the ability to scale your own mind and capabilities to all these different levels of companies. In Module 10, I actually teach you management consulting, because this is a lot of the actual certified management consulting qualification teaches how you engage with clients, how you manage clients and so on. It doesn't actually teach you any technical stuff. It doesn't teach management of innovation. It doesn't teach systems implementation or anything like that. But it teaches you the broad concepts of how you manage a consulting engagement. And then you're expected to, your content knowledge, whether it's marketing management or operational management or strategic management or planning, that is what you bring to the table. And then you learn the management consulting process in which you apply that stuff. And that is a whole skill set on its own. And then there's the fourth and final industrial trip, where you actually go and by that time you're actually presenting the solutions. You've got a PowerPoint presentation ready. You're working on your final report that you hand in to me, but you also hand in to them. Now there might be two versions, because in the report you hand in to me, I also want a section which talks about your actual skill, your actual experiences, your personal experience, your personal development, how you worked with the client, what issues you found, and so on. So it's also a reflection on the whole process of engagement with the client industrial partner. And week 11, then I talk about managing social and political power games. By this time, you won't have, because you're students, because you're not being paid money, because there's no true power issues at stake, you're not going to be exposed to this too much, but you will observe it. You will notice in the behaviors of individuals in the company, there's certain games goes on, there's certain ways of posturing for power and authority, and you might even meet some people who are maybe less excited about you being there, because you're talking about processes and issues that they might be sensitive about. They might be defensive. They might be afraid of you highlighting something. So in that module we talk about the social and political power games that are played, especially when you manage change, when you want to change the status quo. In week 12 you do your final presentation to me in the class, and you're graded for that. So That's always a good experience. Typically, actually, there's sometimes, by the way, is a fifth visit, and I make that optional, but typically there's a fifth visit. Sometimes in the fourth visit, you actually don't do your final presentation. You wait until you do your final presentation to me. In the fourth visit, you're often just refining your solutions. You're being sure that what you're coming up with makes sense, that the client actually agrees that you're not going to get thrown out. You know, when you do choose to make your final presentation. So often the final one happens after the final presentation in the class. Then you take it to the industrial partner. So this is the big picture of the actual course. There are other special courses here, special modules. So I'll just go through a couple of them. You know, how do you actually manage political conflict? How do you develop a team charter? What is a super change agent? These are the specific skills that teach you to be a change agent. These are all competency related modules, and they're not really part of our master's course. These would be trained actually on the job. So I would train internal consultants inside companies. You know, the internal consultant, the consulting difference, how to go about being a consultant inside companies, the art of avoiding the political minefields, what's an administrator versus a manager versus a leader. These are very, very detailed modules that are more about building competency skills, you know, skills that you're learning broader competencies from the 12 modules from the semester course, but these are more advanced ones that I'll tell you about in the course. So at the future you can avail yourself of those when you're in industry, not from me, but from wherever. But you need to build these particular skills, like management of change. It's a very learned process, and you'll find this out you can't do that. That could be a whole master's degree on its own. That's my point. Okay. So here's some recent projects on the last. Oh no, they're not all. They're from various over the years. So one of them was one of our long-term industrial partners in this course is Messier Doughty Bugatti. They're out in Ajax. Now I've worked with them for about 8 years, on and off, from the mid-90s through till the mid-2000s, and still maintain a very strong relationship with them. Many of the people that I trained actually or worked with are now vice presidents and so on. So they've all moved up the hierarchy, so they're able to help my students, which is a good thing. So they build landing gear, and they've been in Ajax in eastern Toronto for a long, long time. And they design the landing gear, very heavy engineering, and they manufacture it as well. So there are various projects that are typically in the engineering area, in project management, or the relationship with suppliers, or how they do risk analysis. These are the kind of projects you get involved with. Siemens has been another long-term partner, electronics, electrical equipment, and they have issues with their quality control issues or supplier management issues. Then Triumph is a company which was called Donley Precision, Donley Gear. Triumph is part of another multi-billion-dollar group out of the United States. I think it's out of Philadelphia. And so they have 2 plants in North Toronto where they make gears, but they also make engine shafts, jet engine shafts. So their customers are companies like Rolls-Royce, Pratt & Whitney, General Electric, helicopter companies and so on. And very technical, very advanced precision machinery. So those are from mechanical engineering or manufacturing engineering background. This is a great area to get exposure. Some of our past students have been hired, by the way, by these companies. Then, of course, you all know Celestica, Don Mills and Eglinton, former IBM company, and they printed circuit boards, PCBs, all this kind of stuff. So one of our recent projects there was to look at how they could achieve a factory of the future concept, so like a lights out factory. It's far reaching, but they also looked at, they actually did technical work on how to reduce energy costs using automation and using factories of the future concepts. The Hatch Associates, big consulting engineering firm, we had a few projects with them in the early stages of this, but there's been a big downturn in the oil and gas sector which has affected them. Pratt & Whitney, jet engines, all kinds of actually aircraft engines. So we've done some work for them also in their product development process. Samco Machinery, I have a 13, 14-year relationship with this company from the late 90s till about 2 years, till maybe mid 2014, 15, 13, 14, 15, around that period. And they are a family-owned business, very successful. Roll forming equipment, cold roll forming, highly technical, high-speed machinery, 300 to 500 feet per minute, putting sheet metal through it and then forming it mainly for the construction industry, and also for decking, roof decking, for drywall structures and so on, roofing structures. So they, very, very technical, very multicultural. There's about 90 languages spoken in the company itself. Again, family run, formed in the 1970s by the father, and I sort of coached the son from his early 20s till his late 30s, and till I really wanted to give up and focus mainly on teaching. And then there's a company called Solarship, another was a really good industrial partner, all composite solar-driven aircraft. I haven't talked to them in a few years, or a couple of years, be interested to know how they are performing. Dell Equipment, this is a manufacturing company, fabrication company over in the east side of Toronto, take trucks and put storage stuff on the back of the truck, pickup trucks and so on. George Brown College, this is a long relationship with the community college, and what it is, they have about 90 companies. They're all small startups where the government's funding them for their, funding their research and funding it into the early stages of startup. So we have worked with many of these companies that are small, maybe sometimes 3 people in the company, or it could be maybe 15. They're in a growth period. Some of them have no income. Some are in the early million, a couple of million, 2, 3 million, 4 million. They're at the early stages of growth, and they're working with George Brown, and they're being funded by the government perhaps to improve their products, improve their processes. And typically George Brown's technology students are focusing on it from a very technical point of view, and often they will partner with us to get our students to look at it from a strategic point of view. Okay, so I talked about levels earlier. So what do we mean by levels of management capability? Not engineering, but management. So if you're looking here, I've talked about this on many of my courses, and I think I talk about it in Module 1. But just the big picture is that frontline management would be levels 1 and 2. Middle management would be level 3 and 4, where you maybe manage a department of 50 people. Once you get into levels 5 and 6, you're managing the division. By the time you're in 7, you're managing a multinational corporation. And by that stage, you may have tens of hundreds of thousands of people reporting to you. So the idea is it's all about managing complexity. How capable are you of managing complexity as you move up the hierarchy? So as you move up the hierarchy here, how do you manage complexity, bringing into being the current and nascent context for future generations? And if you look here, these people who are at this level, typically CEOs, are looking 25 to 30 years into the future, 50 years into the future. Where will the company be? Where will the market be? Where will these products take us? 25, beyond their age, they'll be long gone. But that's the kind of foresight that people at that level are working with. But when you're working down here at the first and second level of managing people directly, your focus is on quality products, quality processes, and so on. Next level is your services. When you work here, you're working over a department, you're looking at your business process practices. But typically here, you're looking from 1 day to 3 months out, 3 to 12 months, 1 to 2 years. So it's all about looking out and being able to manage that complexity into the future. This whole concept of complexity management is actually called the requisite organization, and it's developed by its guru Elliot Jacks in the 1950s and 60s. It's still well in use today. I recommend you check out an organization called the Global Organizational Design Society. And as you move up into the strategic level, so here you'll be looking at maybe managing a division or maybe managing a small business. you're looking 2 to 5 years out. So how are you going to survive 2 to 5 years? And as you go up again higher, it's 5 to 10 years out here, and then 10 to 20 when you're starting to move into these global companies. So I just wanted to point that out, that there's levels of capability. Some people, no matter what education they have, may not be capable of managing the complexity, because I'm going to say this, the higher up this hierarchy go, the more your emotional intelligence, the more your ability to manage people and manage expectations and inspire others to create vision, in other words, to lead the leaders, the more those inherent skills are going to be required. And there's no question leadership can be taught, management can be taught, there's no question. But these levels of management up here sometimes require something that comes from within to inspire other people. And that necessarily may not be able to be trained in individuals. Let's go to the next slide. So here I show this over and over. Again, it's the higher levels of cognitive thinking. So these are two academics in the United States, Bloom and Anderson. So basically, having knowledge for knowledge's sake is at the bottom. Comprehension, knowing why the laws of thermodynamics exist. How do you apply these laws? How do you synthesize information when you actually apply them in the real world? And then how do you evaluate them? Now, take that same principle, I used the technical principle, take that into a management context, because this course is about managing. And let's say you have 100 people and you have issues. You've got to be able to have the knowledge of how to actually talk to those various people. So to relate to a marketing person, relate to a finance person, relate to a mechanical engineer, electrical engineer, systems engineer, and so on. You have to be able to have that knowledge. Then you have to comprehend what the issues are. Then you have to actually apply on the real job what they're telling you. You have to know how to interpret it. And that's where you analyze it, analyze what the issues are, the root causes. And you're learning this on this course. Then you synthesize. There could be issues in various departments that you have to then synthesize into a cohesive message for the executives to make them make change. So you might synthesize it under business process, another one under culture, another one under leadership issues, another one under technology issues, IT issues, for example, software issues. So that's all to do with synthesis. Then you evaluate and you make bold statements. You stand in front of 20 executives and you say, right, this is what's broken in your company and this is how you go about fixing it. Similarly, Anderson's taxonomy is very similar, except at the very top he has creativity, where you're after evaluation, you're actually coming up with creative solutions, because that's really why they're hiring you. That's why you're there. You're there to come up with solutions and be creative. I created my own hierarchy here of knowledge. So I basically said, this is the guys out of high school. This is where you have your first degree, bachelor's degree. You have a long way to go before you start managing innovation and enterprises with an engineering degree. Here then you become a practitioner engineer. So there you could become a mechanical. You could specialize in aerodynamics. You could specialize in energy systems. You could specialize in electronic systems, but you're a practitioner, 5 or 10 years practical experience, and then you choose, because you have leadership abilities, or you're an entrepreneur, or you want to buy a company, you need to learn business administration, you want to move into management. So you could do an MBA here, or just take courses and get your MBA through courses and get it on the job. Then you maybe get a position as the plant manager or a divisional manager, where you've got multi-functions working for you. Then you move into innovation management, and by the time you get to the top, you're actually starting to shape society. So I put all these components, these are all the different bodies of knowledge. So if you did an MBA, you'd have marketing, finance, accounting, strategy, IT, R&D, sales. Once you move into management practice competencies, you're focused on things like lean manufacturing, process management, project management, management of change. And it's these components that serve to make a change management and leadership practice. In other words, that serve to teach you management of innovation. These are the kinds of courses that you would learn on a master's in innovation management course, or on engineering management, or the elite processes at the courses at University of Toronto. Lo and behold, the United States government created their own knowledge and competency map, which shocked me because I'd never seen it before I made my own. And so they basically said at the very bottom is personal effectiveness, interpersonal skills, integrity, professionalism. Then your academic skills in science and technology, critical thinking, active learning. Then your workplace competencies. I mean, this is not research oriented. This is for people working in industry or working in government, but working and doing in the world of work, not doing research. Could be applied to doctors, lawyers, accountants, engineers, and so on, or scientists even. But your competence to be specified by industry representatives. In other words, do you really understand the aerospace or the construction industry, the automotive industry, electronics industry, or the consulting industry? There's many, many industry sectors. So not only do you have to have these workplace competencies, how you plan and organize, how you work with customers, then you have to learn the actual industry you're in. Then from there, you have your technical competency. So you could be a tool designer, you could be a software programmer for oil and gas. So that's where your technical competencies, you're building competencies all the way up. And up here is the management competencies should you choose to go into those higher levels of leadership. So here you're looking at how do you staff, how do you motivate, how do you prepare and evaluate budgets, how do you manage conflict, how do you problem solve complex issues, stuff you're going to learn on applying innovation. So this is where the applied innovation course really fits. The other thing I want to get you to also understand, and this is more where you have to reflect on who you are. Many people run around with special knowledge on special subjects. The whole idea behind this is to show fragmented thinking, silo thinking. So you walk into a company and you see it from your own narrow education, you see it from your own narrow perspective. If you want to move up the hierarchy, if you want to manage across functional functions and disciplines and across even industry sectors, you're going to have to acknowledge your limitations, acknowledge what you know, what you don't know, and acknowledge how all those components fit together into a holistic way. And that's where this thing comes in, holistic thinking, where you can see things in 3D, 4D if you think of emotional issues, 5D if you think of instinct as a valuable dimension of your being. So you have to be able to think holistically. You have to see the patterns that occur in organizations. Should you go into leadership, if you want to stay in technical engineering, you don't have to bother about all this stuff. You'd look at the technical systems of an aircraft or of a car or of electronic device and focus on that. But once you move into management, you deal with the emotional issues, working across suppliers, partners, customers, and so on. Then you're dealing with very, very complex political, social, economic issues. And you've got to do so in a holistic way and see how they connect. So that's another purpose for these courses. So this just shows you components of strategic systems thinking. That you're vision driven, a future state vision. You focus on the long term trends and impacts. You anticipate unwanted risks. You know how to assess risks. You allow for intelligent opportunism. You weigh decisions against various criteria, how much it costs, the ability to make a difference, and its impact. What's the impact of the initiative? Therefore, it makes the extreme cost valuable. And how long is it going to take? Do you have the competency? So you have to weigh all these different issues up. And in the top right-hand one here, you see systems, the causes and relationship. So that's this. You see all the systems and subsystems and their relationship. And I teach this in the last module, the whole concept of systems thinking. In fact, here's the slide, talks about it. So here you have the self. If you look at a world system, yourself would be at the center, and then your relationship one-to-one with people, then your relationship on teams, and then the team's relationship between departments, and then the relationship with the overall organization, then the organization itself and its environment, meaning the government, It's customers, it's suppliers, it's civic duty to society, and then the community society, and then there's an earth system. And this is being called by academics the 8 natural rings of reality. But you could take that self and you can break that down into your own organs and bacteria and cell structure and DNA. So we're all layers of systems from external to ourselves and internal to ourselves. And this is the kind of thinking that you have to have in order to solve complex problems in industry as a leader, as an innovative leader. So I talk about that in Module 12. Types of innovation, just to put it in perspective, you will learn this in Management of Innovation, APS 1012. There's product innovation, service innovation, process, new management structures, open innovation, working beyond boundaries, and then value, creating unique values that eliminates the cost to compete. In other words, cost reduction, increasing the value. I will hold a workshop. I think I've gone through that. It's the detailed steps. They're here. So we start up, basically, I follow the whole process in the book. You start a team, you research the customer need, you select the issues to improve, you define their processes, you agree standards on performance. Some of this you can skip, by the way. Then you implement the processes, confirm what their process is, set the improvement objectives, then you move into the improvement phase. So this is all the business analysis phase. This is just another way to depict that same approach. And this is the continuous improvement, or where you're moving into. So it's a step-by-step process. So you define detailed levels on a fishbone diagram of the root causes. You gather data on the root cause to prove it, what's causing 80% of the problems and so on. You won't have the time to do a lot of that unless the industrial partner gives it to you. Then you select the root causes, you formulate alternative solutions, evaluate the solutions, conduct an experiment. Again, you won't have time for that, but they can do it. You teach them how to do it. Document the solution and then implement. We don't do any implementation. But that essentially is the sort of broad mechanics of the course. And just to let you know that those 17 steps could have been broken down simply as identify the problem, analyze it, generate solutions, select them, implement, and evaluate. Following this sequence of wasting time and so on. So the 17 steps that I have are, maybe 3 of them are there, 3 here, 2 here, and so on. This is just a simplified version. Okay, so I look forward to working with you on the course, working with the external partners. You can now watch Module 1. It'll give you much greater detail on the actual content of the course in great depth. Thank you very much.